Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for Buzzy Magazine. With me today is New York Times best-selling author Jack Campbell, who is also John G. Henry. Welcome, John.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. You're probably best known for the Lost Fleet series featuring Admiral Blackjack Geary. I've read it was inspired by Xenophon's Anabasis. Ancient Greek history and military science fiction seem polar opposites. What inspired you to combine the two?
The initial inspiration came quite a few years ago when another author asked me about Star Trek, whether it was possible to do a long retreat scenario in Star Trek in space, and the answer was no. The technology didn't work in a Star Trek universe where you could do that. But it got me thinking about, could you do that? And the Anabasis is the classic long retreat scenario, so could I make a situation that fit that? And then I combined that with another thing that I wanted to write about for some time, which was a legend which exists in many cultures of a sleeping hero who will someday return when needed.
Arthur?
King Arthur is a big example in Western civilization. And I thought these heroes of myth were real people once. What would happen if one of them actually did wake up and discover that everybody expected them to save the day? And that concept meshed perfectly with the long retreat scenario, and putting those two together is what brought out the Lost Fleet.
What is it, do you think, about Blackjack that has made him such a popular hero? A hero who can sustain not only one series, but multiple series. What resonates about him?
I think the most important thing is that he doesn't think of himself as a hero, doesn't think of himself as special. He does not believe the hero worship. He thinks he is somebody who has to do the best he can. He knows that if he does not try to live up to this legend, then a lot of people who believe in him are going to die. So he has to do his best. He has to do his best to be someone he doesn't think he really is. And he does try. And he has a moral core that guides his actions throughout this. So he's not just an opportunist. He's not someone who thinks he's the greatest thing that ever was. He's just somebody who's trying to do his job.
Mm-hmm. That the series is no longer just the initial Lost Fleet series. You've got a second Lost Fleet series, and you've got a third Lost Fleet related series called Lost Stars. Will there be more?
Yes, there will be. Initially I just planned for the 6 books in the Lost Fleet series, but as the series was ending, there was a lot of demand from readers to hear more about what happened to Geary and the other characters. And of course the publisher wanted me to do more. I had to come up with new storylines, and part of that was the Lost Stars series, as well as the Beyond the Frontier, giving new situations for Geary to encounter, new things for him to deal with. So I've already turned in the sequel to the second Beyond the Frontier book. That'll be the third one. It's called Guardian. It'll come out in May. And I've just finished the manuscript for the second Lost Stars book, which is going to be called, at this point, Rogue Queen. And there will hopefully be more beyond those. It depends on the readers. I have some ideas and concepts, and hopefully I'll be able to carry them on for more stories.
So the universe is open-ended. It's not a closed system, if you will, from a story standpoint.
No, I mean the original series, the 6 books in the original
Yes.
Lost Fleet, were a complete story arc. But of
Yes.
course, any story is going to have lots of loose ends, especially when it involves, major wars and all kinds of things. There's always things that go on that you have to deal with. And Geary's dealing with that right now. Dealing with a situation, challenges that are quite difficult, even if they're not the same as the ones he faced before. And at the same time, some decent people who were on the side of the enemy are dealing with their own sets of challenges. And by integrating those two storylines, I've really helped keep things fresh for me, for the stories, and come up with new ideas.
You mentioned those decent people who are on the other side, and that is the core of Lost Stars. What inspired you to take their point of view?
Well, there were 2 aspects of it. One was that a lot of readers wrote me and said they wanted to hear more about the Syndics. What were they like? Throughout the series, I didn't make them cardboard enemies. I tried to make them real people, in which some of them did terrible things because they wanted to, but others seemed to be doing the best they could with the situation. They weren't uniform or a monolithic enemy who were just evil because they were evil. And because of that, people wanted to know more about them. So that was one aspect of it. And another big aspect was, as I said, the need to keep the stories fresh. This was a totally different perspective. I would be able to tell things from the point of view of the bad guys, get in different kinds of activities and actions which I didn't have before. Basically tell new stories instead of retelling the old ones.
How much of the tactics and strategy that we see in your books is based on what you learned during your time in the Navy?
And I did apply a lot of that. Most of it was simply in figuring out how things would actually work in space. Rather than replicating something that happened on Earth, I had to think, what would ships be like in space because of the environment is so different? What kind of weapons, what kind of encounters would make sense given that kind of thing. And then from that, using my training, I could figure out how you would actually do 3D engagements on a battlefield with no limits. That is so huge that light literally takes hours to go across the battlefield. I could then, because I was a ship handler and I know about relative motion from experience, I could work out in my mind how you would actually do a three-dimensional battle with these massive ships traveling at tremendous speeds over these vast distances. So it played a very big role in it. And then, of course, the whole questions of sensors and combat arrangements, the formations they use, the command and control arrangements, and the relationships of the different officers and specialists to everybody. All of that goes into it.
Yeah, I was very impressed. I expected the command realism when I was reading the opening chapters of things like the first Lost Fleet book and also Stark's War. What I wasn't expecting, was very impressed with, was the way you captured the motion in space in a spacesuit in Stark's War. You know, what it would feel to be like to be running across the moon in all the protective gear that you have to wear. And the fact that a soldier who has a spacesuit malfunction or a wardrobe malfunction has to go back to the transport immediately or die, period.
Yes, yes. That's, I think, a very big part of anything that happens in space. The whole logistics angle, the equipment has to work. You have limited supplies of things. Oxygen, food, everything else, fuel supplies. You work that all in because that's a big part of the story, and that puts limits on what your characters can and can't do, and those limits force the kind of hard decisions that make for a better story.
When you joined the Navy, did you ever have a secondary career as a writer in mind?
I think, like a lot of people, I wanted to write someday. I didn't have any specific plans of when I was going to do it or using my military experience, but as it turned out, I got exposure to a tremendous number of different things in the Navy which I could apply in my work. And over the years, I make half-hearted efforts to try to start writing, but I was never really ready until I was just about to retire, and then something just said, now's the time to give it a shot, and so I did.
The switch turned on at just the right time.
Yes.
That's great. What are you working on now?
Well, what I'm working on now, as I said, I've got the continuing the Beyond the Frontier series with the Lost Fleet, the continuing stories in the Lost Stars series. I've also got a series my agent's trying to sell, which is a science fiction story set on another planet. It's kind of, I call it steampunk with dragons.
Oh, cool.
But it's science fiction. All of this is rationally based. And it's a lot of fun because it uses a lot of comfortable technology, what I call comfortable technology. Sailing ships, steamships, steam locomotives, that kind of thing. And So those are my big novel ones, and then occasional short stories. There's an Audible anthology coming out soon, an audiobook anthology.
Yes.
I've got a story in that it's called Rip Off, the anthology, and my story is called Highland Reel. And it uses the first line from Macbeth to introduce a story about a real Highland young woman who encounters a Brigadoon-type village. And then in the next issue of Analog, I have I think it'll be the January 2013 issue. I have a story which is a long lost and recently rediscovered extra chapter to the War of the Worlds.
Anything you'd like to add?
I'm just very grateful that I've been able to reach as many readers as I had. A lot of people say that science fiction is dead. I don't think it's dead. I think you just have to tell a good story about people. The equipment is secondary. The setting is important, but what's really important is the people and how they're interacting with things and the stories those people have. And if you focus on that, then science fiction is just as relevant and as interesting as it's ever been. And of course, one of the truisms is that supposedly readers don't like a lot of detail or scientific fact. They prefer hand-waving. But I put things like relativistic distortion and light speed limits in my books, and the readers like that. It makes the story better, and they like reading about things that are based on reality. So that's been very gratifying.
Great. And there was a review you mentioned about space opera, and it was praised for being a great character study?
Yes, a hard SF book that was praised for being a great character study. It can be done.
It can be done, and you do it well. Thank you so much, John. And thank you from Buzzy Magazine.